it was Jonathan Ford once again.
And he could have won it this year, I suppose. He was eligible, but he didn't play well enough to win it this year. Sarah and David, you didn't play a part in this one. So,
no.
Alan, who did you go for and why?
So I went for Luke Hooley, the fullback from Batley, although no longer. Departed.
Rowan Smith voted for him as well, I think.
He did, and he's a man of discerning tastes. To me, I was trying to look outside Lee for a choice from the games that I've seen.
Is that because you felt Lee players there was so many options and they were all like the Galacticos of the Championship that you wanted to credit someone else?
I wanted to shine the light on somebody else that's played particularly well this year in a team that's not massively overstacked. And I think for me, Hooley was, whenever I've seen him, and that's probably half a dozen times I've seen him play this year, he's been the best player on the park most of the time. One of those classic players, and I've said this when I've watched it, I've said he's exactly the kind of player who deserves to get his shot in Super League.
Was it Wakefield he came through at and never really got given a chance by them?
Well, it was a Bradford junior, ironically.
Oh.
And he went during one of our many, many administrations.
Yeah,
I forget which one. He went in one of the 5 stars, and I think he did go to Wakey for a bit. I think he's probably a good example of those kind of players who mature a bit later. Your Walmsleys of this world.
Well, it'd be good to see what he gets up to in a full-time environment again. Won't it?
Yeah, it's exactly. He deserves a chance, I would say, because he's shown potential, and I'm sure it's not a massive deal. They're giving him a 2-year contract, which I think is a good step. It gives him a chance to hopefully stake his claim and give him a chance to feature for Leeds. But yeah, he was my choice as a player who I wasn't looking at pre-season as an outstanding player, but for me, he definitely has been great this year.
I went for a more obvious choice. I haven't watched as much Championship Rugby League as you have this year, but every time I've watched Edwin Apapi for Lee, he's either come on and changed games or ran the game when he's played longer minutes, and I just think he's been exceptional whenever I have seen Lee play. So and I'd never heard of him. He was one of their sort of signings, overseas signings, that I think now they can't do without. Like they've got bigger known names that they will not be keeping for next year because they'll want to keep this guy, I think, because it's been that good for them. So I went with Edwin Apapi as my Championship or League One Player of the Year. There were actually 20 players in all that got votes. The only ones that got multiple votes were the winner, Edwin Apapi, with 24% of the votes. Blake Ferguson, he was the only other player to get more than 10% of the votes. And Lachlan Lamb, who only played about a month but got multiple votes. And T. Ritson as well, who, David, I might bring you in here because he's one of the names being highly touted as the replacement for Regan Grace. And given that you've binned off all your other young outside backs, saying they're not good enough, any have got experience anyway. T. Ritson, what do you reckon? Do you think he's going to be in at St. Helens? It does seem like a strong rumour.
It's not a rumour I've actually heard, Mark, to be honest.
Oh.
I think, no, honestly. So I think almost all the Saints fans I know and the guys I communicate with at Red V and so on, all want Murphy from Wakefield. That's it. We're done. So they just got to get Murphy from Wakefield. We're not interested in anybody else.
Yeah, I don't know that that's as straightforward as getting T. Ritson from Barrow.
God no. God no, I'm sure it won't be. But we're not interested in signing anyone else at the moment anyway, not that I know of. So we're all us Saints fans want Murphy to come. So we'll leave that with the club, see what they can do.
I heard Ritson has been shown around at the Totally Wicked, so but I've not heard anything to suggest Wakefield are letting Lewis Murphy go, who signed a new contract just recently. So
yeah, I think T. Ritson would be a good option for you. From what I've seen of him, he has been very good.
It's good. I mean, I think one of the things I do think is that you're right, Mark. We have let a number of outside backs go who have been tried, have had opportunities at the club, but that we don't believe are long-term solutions at Saints. So, whichever way we go, we need to fill out one or two more back options, I think, anyway. So even if we did get Murphy to come in on the wing, then we probably do need a few more lads, because we brought quite a few up from the academy anyway. We probably could do with some more sort of blokes who've played first team football to come in and fill out some of the squad along the back line at Saints next year. But having had the tip off now, Mark, I'll go and see whether I can. Yeah, go and see if there's any highlights packages there that I can have a look at.
On to the Women's Player of the Year. David, do you want to take us through the previous winners of that award?
I certainly will. So previous winners in 2018, it was Lois Fussell. In 2019, Courtney Wingfield-Hill. In 2020, it wasn't awarded for obvious reasons. And then last year, it was Saints' own Jodie Cunningham.
Yeah, I mean, they were all exceptional players in those seasons. And I think, for us, clear winners, weren't they? Although Georgia Roach won the Woman of Steel in 2018, Lois Forsell absolutely dominated the SLP Awards that year, because the couple of televised games we got to see of Lois Forsell, she was outstanding that year. Now we get to see a little bit more, and there's been multiple formats and tournaments this year that we've been able to watch the players over. So David, I'll start with who got your vote this year.
I mean, it's a tough vote now, isn't it? Because there are actually so many really good women players who've lit up the game over the last 18 months to 2 years now.
And get a spotlight on them now as well. We actually get to see them more regularly. Even they've had 4 or 5 games on Sky this year.
Yeah, which is brilliant to see. So I voted for Georgia Roach this year. I've seen her play a few times during the course of the season, including once live, and I think she's a hugely talented player. But as I was saying, if you look at the list of other people that were in the voting, there's so many good women players now. I'm really looking forward to them. I'm always optimistic naturally, but I'm really looking forward to seeing them test themselves out, some of these ladies, against the best in the world from Australia and New Zealand in over the coming weeks.
Yeah, Sarah went Georgia Roach as well. We're all fingers crossed. I've not seen a clear update of whether Georgia Roach will be right to go in the World Cup, but I think that makes England better with a game-breaking player like that, who finally, I thought, was starting to look good in big games by the end of the Super League season, but then missed the playoff run, and Leeds still managed to win anyway without her. Me and you went the same way, Alan. We went with a different player, so tell us about Tara Stanley and why you voted for her.
It was a difficult choice, as David kind of alluded to. There was a lot of, I saw much more of it this year. Rather than just kind of big games, and there were definitely more candidates. Tara Stanley, for me, whenever I did see her, she's a kind of game-breaking player, the kind of player that really does make a difference, and I don't mean this to be derogatory, she's quite flashy as a player as well. So she kind of gets your attention because of that.
That ponytail swinging when she does that left foot step, that makes everyone go the wrong way.
Exactly.
You notice it, don't you?
Exactly. So to me, she was the leader in a very good field. I think if I was just judging it on the last couple of games, I probably would have gone for Caitlin Beavers, to be brutally honest with you. But on the balance of the season and how good York were early on, I went for Tara Stanley. Yeah,
I think Beavers and Butcher played well in the big games this year, the finals and that sort of thing. But Tara Stanley, every week there was a highlight reel play from Tara Stanley. She was the best player in the Nines weekend, or the Nines tournament that they had, wasn't she? That York won. She won the Woman of Steel. She led, in terms of a dominance of a play, York to a league leaders shield, and it just seemed a stretch too far, as it always does for Lindsay Anfield's sides to actually win that final. But I think, like you, Tara Stanley stood out throughout the whole year. And we weren't the only ones who thought that, because Tara has won the Women's Player of the Year award with 33% of the vote. There were some other people who got plenty of votes, though. Roach got 20%, Amy Hardcastle got 18%, Jodie Cunningham 16%. There were also votes for Holly Dodd, Sinead Peach, who I think it's ridiculous that she's not in the England squad, but obviously face doesn't fit. Caitlin Beavers, Courtney Winfield Hill, Chloe Smith, who I guess plays for Cass because Fatboy Rob voted for her. Margot Canal, who's one of those French players that came over, finished the season with York, also plays in the French competition. So, and Hannah Butcher as well picked up a vote as well, moving from the half-back positions to playing a lot of the game in the centre, a little bit in the back row, a lot of the season in the centre, though, for Leeds, and really impressing. Lots of excitement there. I suppose with the Women's World Cup on the horizon, I was listening to one of the 40/20 library episodes that they've been releasing recently, and it was the one where they had Tamsin Renouf, I want to say, on, and they made the point, a very good point, that the women's NRL, as exciting and talented and brilliant as those athletes are, their games are 35-minute halves played with a size 4 ball. The World Cup will be 80-minute halves played with a full size 5 ball that the women play with in the Super League. So the bigger ball, I think, is a little bit harder to handle in a weird way than the smaller ball for them, because it's not going to be what they're used to. So there's an element of home field plus the rules and that sort of stuff that might help overcome some of what I would say there is a bit of a skill and physical ability deficit between us and the Kiwi Ferns and the Aussies. But I think we can't say we're not a chance.
No, and I'm really excited to see how we do. I really am. I think it'll be a very good comp. And let's see.
I've got tickets to every one of the England women's group games. I think, Alan, you planning on seeing some of the women's stuff as well, aren't you?
Yes,
in the World Cup.
Yes, yeah. The games in York, particularly for me. But yes, it's going to be interesting. I hadn't appreciated that thing about the particularly the ball. I mean, that will definitely affect things like kicking. It's going to affect things like that.
Yeah.
So. Interesting. That will be interesting to see whether it does have an impact, or whether in a couple of weeks of preparation that they're obviously having now, whether that's enough. I don't know.
Right, let's move on to one of the more established awards, one of the more spread out awards. I mean...
A third distribution.
Yes, typically the winner of this award does not receive a high percentage of votes because a lot of people get votes. It's the most underrated player. What makes an underrated player? Who knows? Anything could make an underrated player. Sarah, what do you think makes an underrated player?
Well, clearly I don't know, as I didn't cast a vote.
Is that because it's so hard to determine, though, what is underrated and what's not underrated?
I think, I really, really struggled, to be honest. And then looking at the list of people who were nominated, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can go with him. Yep, I can go with him. Yep, I can go with him. And
we're going to go through all 45 people who got votes. 45 people got votes.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with maybe 30 of them.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us, though? And welcome to the show.
Yes.
Welcome. Good evening.
Good evening.
Do you want to tell us who the previous winners of the Most Underrated Player award have been?
Yeah, so previous winners in 2014 it was Oliver Holmes, 2015 was Carl Ablett, 2016 was Rhys Hanbury, 2017 was